Sam, if you have some whiskey you want to sip, go ahead and sip on it.
I've got, you know, I typically don't have my first cocktail until 4 o'clock, but I did almost go get me one before we got started. Let me, if I can, Alvin, let me talk about something you just said, and that is that as a rich guy, I feel that I have a responsibility to pay my taxes, to pay more taxes. And I think that where the dialogue gets lost sometimes, where the story goes awry, is that we all have to pay our taxes. Every American has to pay some financial alms to the nation for us to continue to be a nation. And that's not just rich people, it's the working class, anybody. However, when you're only paying people $7.25 an hour, there's not enough money that they get on a weekly basis to pay any taxes. And I tell people this, that have businesses that are employing people at unlivable wages. And I tell them, you know what you're doing is you're asking them to invest in your company by working for sub-livable wages. And that is a subsidy to your company. And that's just not right. They're investors with no equity. It's just wrong. But we all have to pay more taxes. But when you're lucky enough to be born a white guy in this country, and there right then, I don't know if you've seen Chuck Collins' book, Born on Third Base, but that is as true an aphorism as exists. And that is, white guys are born on third base, at the very least on second. Yeah. To think that you started out at a home plate and you just crushed a line drive out through the infield and you got to second or third base, that's not what happened. Right. When you popped out of the womb, you were already on second or third base. Mm-hmm. And most of my white friends don't accept that. They do not see the imbalance that exists in our country for the community of color at large. They just don't understand that. And even white women are largely disadvantaged because we're a white man-controlled society. Yeah. And to ignore that, to me, is either stupidity or naivete or just hard-headedness. And you don't want to accept the fact that you got a leg up on everybody else. But when it comes to taxes, we've got to figure out a way, because the tax structure is what is grossly imbalanced in our country right now. It is so heavily weighted to those of us that are lucky enough to get to that point to where you have a lot of money. And so what you do is you start paying attorneys and wealth advisors and CPAs to help you manage the continued accumulation of wealth in as tax a reduced fashion as possible. And that's why wealth management is one of the fastest growing businesses in the United States, because so much of us are making so damn much money. And I'm not complaining about that. Listen, I love being rich. Right. I'll take being rich any day. And I've been broke multiple times in my life, and rich is better, let me tell you. But we have a responsibility to our nation. We have a responsibility to every human being that lives in this nation behind us. It's coming behind us. We have an obligation to leave it better than we received it. And my generation will be the first generation in the history of the United States, in my opinion, that will leave America in worse condition than it was when we were put in charge 40 or 45 years ago. We've done a shitty job of maintaining the integrity of the financial structure of this country for following generations, and shame on our sorry asses.
I love it. And here's the thing, though, because I like to follow Tom Hartman. I don't know if you know anything about him, but he writes a book. He talks about okay. He's an old school progressive and a writer, and he talks about how there was a time when a company head, or company just as an entity, but specifically, the CEOs and all the bigwigs in the company, they used to have a lot more pride as far as like how they took care of their employees and compensated them, how they took care of the community around them, and how they took care of their customers. And obviously those things come with a cost in the sense that, if you're making sure your product's of high quality, that means, your margins, they start to decrease. If you're making sure your employees are getting paid well, obviously that's less money for your shareholders. So there was a time when that was the norm, but as these CEOs started to have like less shelf life with their companies, they became more infatuated with just making sure your quarter is better than your last quarter, right? And so they started to suck money up. Unions started to get busted left and right, and we're in a position where we're in a business cultural society where all they're worrying about is their money. They don't care that they're about to leave this world worse off than it was before. They don't care that they poisoned the water for, the kids of that community. It just doesn't matter. And to go back to what you're saying earlier about being born on second base and third base, the worst thing about that for me is that we still live in a culture that believes that we are in a meritocracy. So there's like a more sinister situation going on when if someone's born on second or third, they believe that they've earned it. But even worse, if you're not born there, it's like you deserve to be on first base. You deserve to not even get on base. Like there's something morally wrong with you. And it's, there's this maliciousness that goes on with it, which kind of plays into why they believe they deserve these tax breaks, why they don't believe an employee doesn't deserve more than $15 or $7 an hour. It's like this, it's almost like it's written in stone in the sense that you deserve to be here, we deserve to be up here.
Al, it takes a huge commitment in many cases to do the right thing. A lot of times it's just a lot easier to just justify intellectually, sophistically, whatever it takes to get what you're doing into a place of righteousness. It's hard, but it's doable. And that's why we've become okay with not paying an adequate amount of taxes in order to sustain the country, because we've come up with a few lines of believable and accepted bullshit that everybody's gotten okay with. Like, the reason I don't want to pay taxes is because it's not spent on what I want it to be spent on. The reason I don't want to pay any more taxes is because I don't like the way the government spends it. Right. The reason I don't want to pay any more taxes is because it'll go to lazy people who just aren't working hard. All these lines of BS that are just that, because what that does is it provides them a pass. It provides them a pass. I've got a friend that had a big transaction year before last, and he made $120 million, $120 million, and paid $20 million in taxes, which is a lot of money, without a doubt. $20 million, but so is 120. 120 million is a lot of money too. Yes. So if he paid another $20 million instead of 20, instead of being left with 100, he'd have been left with 80. Still a lot of money.
Still a lot.
A lot more money than the vast majority of Americans will ever see in the total of their lives. And so how do you sleep with that? How do you go to bed at night and not feel guilty about that? Well, you come up with lines of bullshit that will allow you to make it okay. That I only want to pay taxes on the things I want to pay it on, or the government spends it frivolously, or people that are broke because they're lazy. You use whatever line works for you, but allows you to sleep at night. And what we have to do is the government just has to do the right thing. We've got to change tax law so that it achieves fairness, equality, so that everybody has basically the same opportunities. And when you hit it out of the park, you just pay more. You just pay more. You just pay more in, but you'll still get rich. You'll still be rich. You may, instead of having 2 planes, you might just have 1. Instead of having 4 vacation homes, you may only have 2. But so what? It's human nature. You got to come up with whatever line works for giving you a pass on being greedy, and that's what we do. We're a pretty creative creature.
Now, Stephen, you expect millionaires to only have 2 vacation homes like a savage?
That sucks, man. Let me tell you,
This
it
is
really
terrible.
does suck.
You're a cold-hearted
Yeah,
man,
it's
so you know.
horrible.
Well,
Yeah, it is tough.
yeah, it's funny because you think about your friend here. Now, I assume this past year wasn't the first time he's cleared over $100 million. Am I correct?
Oh no, that's first year he's ever cleared that amount. Now he still made, $5-6 million a year before that. Still not chump change by any means.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you own companies like we do, your big liquidity event is the day you sell the company or the day you do an IPO or otherwise you just make a lot of money. But Alvin, if you make $5 million a year, I know that's a tremendous amount of money, and you're going to pay probably 37% taxes on that. So that's $1.8 million in taxes out of $5 million. So you're still going to be left with $3.2 million post taxes.
Yeah.
Not an insignificant amount of money. But what happens in the defense of we wealthy people is as our income goes up, we spend more and more and more. And so when you go from making $1 million a year, we're just like everybody else. If you made $35,000, you got a $10,000 raise, you go to 45. You know what? It won't take 3 months before you've already eaten up that $10,000. So now you get a $20,000 raise. Now you're making $55,000 a year, and it won't take 3 or 4 months before you eat up the rest of that money. That's the way we human beings are. It doesn't matter what amount you make. You're going to very quickly learn how to spend a large part of what it is that you're making. The way you really get rich is big events. You get a big event where you suddenly get $1 million bonus, or you get a $5 million bonus, or a $100 million bonus. So that it comes in such a big chunk, your spending habits just can't quickly consume all that extra money. And now you start setting money aside. Yeah. Now you start putting money in the stock market and real estate. And that's when your wealth really begins to rise, when you have big liquidity events. So anyway, that's what happened to him. He'd made a lot of money for a long, long time, but he got that one big payday, and that's a life changer.
Interesting. Wow. Because, in my mind, I'm thinking like, 5 million changes your life, and it does. But I guess, clearly 100 million is a much different league, and does something different to your psyche. But in my mind also, it's like, I imagine in the beginning, you buy all your toys, you buy the house you've always wanted, the cars you always wanted, the clothes, things of that nature. And then, if you're entrepreneurial, which I imagine most millionaires are, you buy a company or two and do that sort of thing. But after a while, like, you kind of buy everything you're going to buy. And to me, that was when you start to just kind of hold the money. You know what I mean? Am I wrong about that?
Well, what you do is you start sticking it aside, and you stick it aside into places that are going to continue to grow in value, whether it's real estate, which is typically very slow in increase in value. Stock market can be bad. It can be incredible. I mean, the stock market last year was phenomenal. I made 28% on my money last year. I had a lot of money in the market, and so I made 28% on that money. That's a big deal. Again, just on my end. I mean, look at the 614 billionaires in America. 614 billionaires. Their net worth from March of last year, when the pandemic really kicked in, which was yesterday, a year ago, to a year, their net worth is up over $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Simply because it was in the stock market and it just climbed in value. I mean, I've got friends that made 40 to 50% return on their money in the market last year, and they had 30 or 40 million dollars in the market. So you grow $30 million by 40%. That's $12 million in growth in 1 year, and you didn't do a damn thing. You went on 3 vacations and went fishing in Montana while your money was in New York and the stock market growing for you. But anyway, Alvin, listen, I can ramble on and on forever. I want to make sure I get the specific topics that you want me to cover. Were there any specific issues that you wanted us to discuss? I forget what they were.
Let me look at my notes here. So, the first thing I wanted to go over was just sort of your beginnings, because, if I'm correct, you're from Tennessee. And
well, originally I was raised just 70 miles west of here, a little town called Waycross, Georgia. And I live in St. Simon's Island, Georgia now. But I moved to Tennessee in 1981. So I was there for, what was that, 40 years or 50 years? 40 years. 40 years. I moved there and got into the payments business. But I was raised just in a small town here on the edge of the Okefenokee Swamp in southeast Georgia, and went to school in North Carolina State, moved to North Carolina for a while and put an ex-wife through college. And then I went to college at NC State, moved to Connecticut, and she dumped me for a plumber. And then I married the queen of my life, a gal that I've been married to now we're in our 40th year now. And it's been a great run. She's really at least 50, if not 60 to 70% responsible for whatever success I've achieved in the last 40 years. She's responsible for it. She's just a wonderful, wonderful person, been a great addition to my life.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. Wow. Congratulations on 40 years. Well,
thank you.
If you're Georgia's even better because, you're, a white guy, grew up during the civil rights era. And, I told Sam, because I'm actually related to our late great Congressman, John Lewis. And
wow, really? How related? How much?
We are third cousins. He's my grandmother's cousin. And I actually got a chance to talk to him, a lot before he passed, because I told him I was working on this project. And, he was about it, and he was like, anything that helps people vote and get involved, it's like, I love. So we got a chance to talk about it. And the plan was he was going to help me as we started to launch. But as you know, he got pancreatic cancer a year later, unfortunately passed. But, we, family wise, we have a connection to the civil rights movement. And something I read about you was that, you were a guy, white guy who was supportive of that, which is another thing that maybe ostracized you, in addition to you being like, rich should pay their taxes. So I just kind of wanted you to speak on like how you felt during the civil rights era. Like how did that, if any way, how did you become so progressive being the Southerner, especially during that time?
Well, I think that when you're growing up and in your early years, you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and you're exposed to your parents, to your neighbors, to your teachers, all the people that in your formative years, and that's a very intentional term, when you're in your formative years, I determined as I got older and I came through that period that we as individuals have the opportunity, and typically not selected, it's just part of who we are, as to whether or not we respond positively to the things that we're exposed to or negatively to the things that we were exposed to. And I was really lucky enough, I think, that I had a filtering system that allowed me, or almost mandated, that I filtered out the bad stuff and observed the negativity of it and focused on the positivity that I was exposed to and went in that direction. And I'll give you an example. My father was an alcoholic all of my life, and until he passed away. He was an alcoholic. He was committed to the bottle, and the poor guy, he could not get away from it. And because of that, and so having an alcoholic as a parent, then you start looking around at other people that are alcoholics, and you realize the vast majority of them don't have a good life. It's a big burden to carry alcoholism, and it was no exception for him. And most everybody else I knew that was an alcoholic, it's a big burden to bear. And life's tough without something like that to have to deal with. The same is true with racism. I was raised in a very, very racially charged environment. I remember George Wallace when I was a kid in Alabama, and some of the horrible things that he did, and yet the praise that he got. I remember, and I don't know if this is a story that I should even tell, but when I was a kid, I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and my dad came home one night, and he was really good friends with the sheriff here in Waycross, where I was raised, Robert E. Lee, and Robert, and yeah, imagine that. And my dad and he were really good friends. And he was over at my dad's office. My dad ran the Western Auto store in Waycross, and he was at my dad's office one day, and he got a phone call in my dad's store, because we didn't have cell phones in those days. And so he said, "Hey, come on, I need to go next door." The Greyhound bus station was next door. So they just walked out the back door of the Western Auto store, across the parking lot, into the Greyhound bus station. And there was a black guy who refused to come from the front of the bus. He refused to go to the back of the bus. And Robert, big, tall man, just a huge bear of a man. Actually, he's very thin, but he's a very strong man. He walked in that bus and grabbed that young man by the hair and dragged him down the aisle of that bus and out onto the pavement. Whoa. And told his deputies that were there to arrest him and take him to jail. Now, I wasn't there, but my dad came home and told me that story that night. Now, here's where that decision process comes into play. Do I respond positively and think what a cool thing that was that the sheriff and my dad did, getting that black guy off of that? And of course, we didn't call them black people back in those days in the South. Or do you do what I did and say, what a horrible thing? What a horrible thing that they did, that they felt that was a positive thing for them to do, to drag this man off the bus simply because he didn't want to sit in the back. Yeah. And that sort of thing stuck in my craw early on as a kid. And I finally, when I was in my teens, and we were having the riots in Watts and all over the country in the mid-'60s, and I said on more than one occasion, I oftentimes wish I was born a black guy, because I would have been raising hell. The way we've been treating the African American community, we didn't call them African Americans at that point, the black community from all of my life, and since the day that we put them on ships and brought them over here, is horrible. And shame on our asses that we treated them that way, and we're still treating them that way. And I was and always have been deeply offended by the way we white Europeans have treated any community of color. We've always looked down our noses at the community of color, and I've never really understood the righteousness of that. How can we get that right in our head? And I still, to this day, don't understand. And what really is becoming so much more offensive to me today is, now that it's a topic of open discussion, it's in the press, it's in the news, we're talking about it. All of my white friends who are still racially prejudiced, they just want to deny it. Yeah. They want to come up with excuses. They want to come up with excuses and lies to themselves so they can not pay taxes, so they can still not like people of color, so they can still have all the prejudicial attributes that they've surrounded themselves with in their life. They can still do all that, because you have to have a construct that allows you to sleep at night. And so you can't go to sleep at night admitting that you're racist. You can't go to sleep at night admitting that you're a greedy bastard. You can't. So you come up with this intellectual construct that allows you to give yourself a pass. And that's what's happened on racism for all of my life, all of your parents' life, all your grandparents' life. This shit's been going on for 400 years. My wife and I cruised around the world. We sailed around the world on a big cruise ship 2 years ago, 4.5 months. One of the most selfish things I've ever done in my life. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you're taken care of hand and foot every day. And I'd been to Africa several times, but I'd never been to West Africa. And West Africa is the starting point for slavery. That's where the Africans that were captured and brought over on ships and redistributed, the 4 million Africans that were distributed, 2 million of which died in transit. The 4 million Africans that were captured and distributed throughout the Western Hemisphere. And it was so heartbreaking. Some of the scenes that we saw and the stories that we heard were just mind-boggling, that we human beings have the capacity to treat other human beings that way is just appalling. It's disheartening. I don't know. It's hard for me even now to think about some of they call them castles, but they weren't castles, they were prisons.
Yeah.
And the way that we treated them were horrible. So how, Alvin, back to what I always say when anybody asks me how I get politically the way I am, I'm curious as to how all the people that aren't the same way got the way they are. How could you see racism any other way? How could you see greed any other way? To me, it's just so apparent that it's hard to deny.
Well, that's kind of their tactic, in the sense that, you've heard of the Southern strategy, in which, racism is kind of one of those things, not kind of, it is one of those things that you can't just be out in the open, willy-nilly saying or doing racist things. So you want to code it in a way that it allows a person to disconnect themselves from being a racist. If I don't want to pay taxes because I don't want money going to those people, you can't say, well, I don't want black people getting my money. I don't want the lazy.
Right.
You use those words to kind of code it in such a way. So it never died, and the way it's gotten so sophisticated is incredible. They traded their clan hoods in for 3-piece suits. They're speaking a lot more eloquent and really articulating the
lobbyists. Lobbyists. That's where a lot of it's going, and that's why they're able to continue to maintain their lock nut hold on what's happening in Washington, Atlanta, Tallahassee, Raleigh, all the the electoral environments in the country that write the rules. They control those places.
Yes, sir.
With their money because they want to keep it the way it is. They don't want it to change. Yeah. I mean, look what they're trying to do. They're trying to do 2 years of work that Stacey Abrams did to get more people signed up in the state of Georgia. Now they're trying to change the laws here in Georgia to prevent it. The thing that's so appalling to me about that is, even in an electoral, how many people voted? You know what the percentage of voters that voted in this last presidential election is? Do you know what that number is?
Voters in the entire country? Or
yes.
My research, if I recall, I want to say it was somewhere close to 60-something percent. 70?
That's good. That's good. Better than most. 66%. Highest turnout in the history of elections in the country. 66%. So we still have 34% of America that's not voting.
Exactly.
34% in a best case. 34% still do not go to the polls. Yet we want to stop part of the 66%. I'm pissed off at the 34% that didn't vote. That's who I'm mad at. Yeah. So the last thing I want to do is to try to stop part of the 66% that did come vote from voting. That's the worst thing we could do. We ought to be spending all this time and effort and energy on getting the 34% that don't vote to vote. But to me, it's crazy. It's a crazy, but of course we know what it is. They feel like, and they're right to a large extent, probably a dominant component of that 34% that did not vote are people of color, are people that will not vote for conservative Republican issues. And they're probably smart in trying to do that, but it's un-American. It's un-American. It's not the way we are as a country. Right. It should be as a country.
No, it's 100% that. It's, they know for a fact that the more people vote, the less likely conservatives, Republicans win.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
It's just a fact, because, and that's why they start with people of color, of course. But it's anyone who is anti-war, tax rates for millionaires and corporations, billionaires, and they just know for a fact that these things are unpopular, and they try to suppress that vote. That way, they have a very rabid base. Like, if you're a conservative, typically you're a very rabid supporter. But you're a small group. I always refer to them kind of like, you've seen that movie 300, right?
No. Yeah. The whatever era that was. With
Roman,
all those badass warriors.
Yeah. And that was another thing I learned by being in this right-wing area, where it's like, if they're a small group, but they're fierce. Like, these guys are warriors, Stephen. I wish I could bring you into that building and show you how intense they are, right? Whereas progressives, we're a larger group, but we're not as focused as these guys are, because they understand. They're like, and like they have their back against the wall and they know it, so they fight like it. We, on the other hand, we're very lackadaisical with it, so we just kind of assume.
But Alvin, we're also people who love one another.
That's
We really care about one another. We care about the people, even if they're not troubled. But if they're troubled, we certainly care about them. We care about mankind in general, broadly. We care. And I just don't think that most people on the right do. They care about themselves. They will typically get down one layer to their own offspring. Beyond that, you're on your own. Now, they won't admit to that, but I really believe that that's the case.
No, yeah, absolutely. And like if you're a part of a church or something, they'll handle that sort of thing. They call it community, which is just like everyone who's like them, other white guys.
Right.
Or, again,
Right.
you hear the coded messaging in that. So,
but even be a 15 or 16-year-old white girl that's in that church and don't get pregnant, and the women in the church will turn their back on you because now you've broken the rules.
Yeah.
And you were part of the club until then, but now you're not part of the club anymore. Whatever the case may be, they can always come up with a reason to kick you out of the camp.
Oh man.
It's a human attribute, though.
I mean,
human attribute.
Okay,
so you had wanted to ask me where I came, why I got where I was going to go try back and look at your questions. Well, you had a great list of questions.
Yeah, I think you spoke a lot about your beginnings as far as, because being that young and having that sort of clarity. I mean, that's beyond your years, to be honest. I mean, it's impressive, especially being, I know, surrounded by people who think the exact opposite of you. So to be able to come out of that is beyond impressive.
Well, I read a lot. I read a lot as a child. I always read voraciously, even when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And they were simple books at that point. But I mean, I've always been a big reader. I'm still a big reader. I read every day, probably 2 hours a day at minimum, sometimes as much as 4 hours a day, but usually late at night. I'll read, and I think that's what drove me. Then I got a degree in literature. I studied British literature in college because I knew that it was foundational to me. British literature, for the most part, and then the Bible are critically foundational to Western literary culture. And so I wanted to study those in order to give me that foundation for the balance of my life. And it's worked well for me because it has given me that background construct of why we are where we are today. And it enables me to at least have a view. I may not be right. I'm willing to admit that I may just be as wrong as rain, but I think that I am from a humankind perspective. I think that getting outside of your own personal needs, your own personal little envelope, and being part of the community of all of us is critical to being a genuinely good human being. And that's hard. It's hard to do that because it's much more comfortable to just be concerned about me. Right. Just I want to be concerned about Stephen. Well, that's not a good human being. You can be concerned about Stephen, but you really need to be concerned about everybody. Because we get so caught up in our 75 to 90 years worth of existence on this planet, and we forget that the planet and all the people on it were here way before we got here, and they'll be here, if we're lucky, way after we're gone. Yeah. And so what we've got to do is we've got to spend some major part of every day of our lives worrying about everybody else other than ourselves, and worrying about the environment at large, which is the earth. Right. And we're doing a horrible job of that as well. Horrible job. Shame on us.
And it's sociopathic too, because we know there's no other earth that we can get to right off. You know what I mean? And
everybody but Elon. Elon doesn't accept that.
Yeah. Did you buy your ticket? Are you going to be on the Digital Mars Mansion?
No. I'm good right here. I'm good here.
But it's like, think about how, there's a quote there's a quote out there. It's like, after we've pumped the last bit of oil and chopped down the last tree and breathe our last, or drink our last bit of good water, it's only then will we realize that we can't eat money. And it's true. It's sad.
That's true.
Yeah.
I have heard that. Yeah.
And it's like, come on, like we have, we're humans. We have the ability, unlike any other animal, to have such foresight and can plan and plot our society in such a way that if we just clicked 2 more brain cells together, we'd be able to just be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should make this earth more sustainable for us. Like, it doesn't make sense to extract so much at such a rate. So yeah, we can go on about that too. But
so Alvin, where are you right now physically?
I'm from Missouri.
Oh yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm from Missouri. Moved out here to Los Angeles probably 10 years ago, and I by trade I do motion graphics. So this was like, this is the place you got to be for it. But like I said, my family's very political, so I've always had that in me. And it wasn't until 2016 that I felt like, I heard the call, if you will, that I was like, I got to do something. Like, I love doing motion graphics, but I don't believe I'm going to have a country to do it in much longer.
Well, I'll tell you like I do my kids. I remember after George Bush was reelected in 04, or was it 06? 04. No, 06. Obama was elected in 10, right? 10 through 18. That's right.
Okay. Well, I thought it was 2008.
But anyway, so George got elected the second time, and my oldest daughter now, that's 43, that lives in Hawaii, that I'm going out to see next week, as a matter of fact.
Oh, cool.
She called me, she said, Papa, I may have to leave the country. This is horrible. This is horrible. I said, baby, we're too big a country for one man to bring us down. No. We are at our core a great country. And even look, if we can put up with Donald Trump for 4 years and we didn't come crashing down, I've got hope. I believe that we can survive, because if anybody could have ever brought this country down, he had the capacity to do it. When that guy got 74 million people to vote for him again, right, to be reelected, God, how did that happen? But we made it. We got through. He lost by 7 million votes. We won. That says a lot. That's very energizing to me. It just gives me a sense of possibility that we're going to be able to make it through.
Yeah.
Now, we have to make some changes, right?
We do, because here's the thing, and I don't mean to scare the shit out of you, but so he did win by 7 million votes, but because of our electoral college, they did some research, and he really won by like 40,000, So, that's another one of those things I kind of wanted.
Yeah. I mean, but you can't just casually pull California, New York, all the big left-leaning states. You can't just pull them out. I mean, the electoral system to me it's a mess. Mm-hmm. To me, look, the Electoral College was created in 1776.
Right.
Now, look, I love for very different reasons, for reasons that don't even exist today. The reason is because it would take weeks to go from New York to Atlanta. It probably 4 weeks by horse to go from New York down to Atlanta. I get that. I can understand that. And also, given the fact that the small states didn't want to always be outweighed by the big states. I get all that, but it's time to change. Will we? Probably not. It's sacrosanct. I don't see us getting rid of it, but I think it's a bullshit concept anymore.
Yeah.
Just me.
Out of date. And if you read, the Electoral College is completely out of date. It's nonsense. And also, because I've been reading some of the Federalist Papers, and even like another reason was that they just didn't trust us to pick a president. So they enacted this, group of electors to do it. And we don't even use it for that anymore. So if that's the case, we should just get rid of it. We have the absolute technology to count popular vote.
Right.
I debated many conservatives about this, and they have to admit, it's pretty out of date, despite the fact that they want to keep it for various conservative reasons. One, it leverages them, more than
you know what, Alvin. You know what I put most of my hope in. with the climate, with politics, all the critical issues that I'm so deeply concerned about today, I put it all in your generation's ability to fix it. And I tell my kids that, and I mean that bottom of my heart. I don't know where my generation went bad. I don't know where we went wrong in terms of our greed and our self-interest and our lack of concern for our society at large. But our time is passing. 10,000 people every day become a retiree, 65. The baby boomers are rapidly going down the road. And if we don't totally screw it up between now and the time we're in our mid to late 70s, hopefully you guys will be able to come along and get us back on track. You care about one another more. You're much more egalitarian in your view to man's place in the universe. I think that you guys will get us back on track. I hope so. If we haven't screwed it up, but I don't think we will. I think we'll be okay.
I think we'll get it back on track for sure. So let's talk about some of the Patriotic Millionaires stuff. So in my mind, you know, a bunch of rich, like even one rich guy talking about having his taxes raised and doing all this sort of like altruistic stuff, you know, financially, it's almost kind of a unicorn. And, you know, how did you find, I mean, I think I saw on your site, it's probably close to 50, 60, you know, members, maybe more that are extended. Like, how did you find all these people of means that wanted to actually commit to such a project?
Well, that's a fairly straightforward story. As I said, most of my friends are right-wing Republicans, and some very good friends. And I love them dearly. You know, we just happen to disagree on most of these issues. But this one friend of mine who by all rights should probably be much more conservative than he is, but he's actually a very loving, caring guy. They sold their company and he walked away with $20 or $25 million. And then he started doing missionary work. He started going to Africa and putting in wells for towns and communities. And they came up with a drip irrigation system where they could do drip irrigation for farms and taught people how to raise huge crops out in the bush and primarily West Africa. And so that's the kind of guy he is. He's a caring, loving guy. So I got a call from him one day. He said, "Stephen, I found your place." I said, "What is that?" He said, "Go look up Patriotic Millionaires." So I did. I went online. I looked up Patriotic Millionaires, and at that time, our youngest lived in New York, and Patriotic Millionaires was based in New York at the time. So I went online and I looked and I saw Erica, and you should go watch Erica Payne and Eric Schoenberg on YouTube on Fox News, and watch him go into the den with all the lions, and they take them on, and they both came away winning. Eric kicked Stuart Barney's ass. Have you seen that YouTube video?
No, but I hate Stuart Barney, so I don't know if I want to watch that.
Watch it. You love it, because I hate him too.
That's his voice, man. I can't.
But Erica did the same thing. This is 12, 13 years ago. And she is so good. She's just a political genius. She really is. She's a great strategist. She's got a fire in her belly that'll never go out. And so I said, I got to reach out to these people. So I called Erica and I said, I want to come meet with you. I said, I want to give you $1 million. And so I told one of her staffers, they said, I think you need to talk to this guy. So I said, look, I'm coming up to New York. I'd like to come meet with you and talk to you about what I can do about giving money to support you. So anyway, a backstory. I decided that money was where the answer was in terms of fighting the dialogue. And what I had decided to do is I was going to form an organization, a nationwide organization of 100 people. And each one of us would put in $1 million, and we put $100 million pile of money together. And then, Alvin, it dawned on me when I started listening and watching that $100 million was chump change. The Koch brothers gave $783 million away in one election cycle. So what's $100 million going to do? How much did we spend on this last presidential election? it was probably $1 billion, $2 billion on this. I mean, they were purported to be, it's probably more than that, because the Georgia senatorial races were projected to be $1 billion. Now, I don't know if it was or not. So anyway, luckily I found Erica, because I wouldn't have gotten anywhere even with $100 million. And so I went up and sat down with her and fell in love with what they were doing and how they were doing it, and just locked in. At that time, we were probably 75 or maybe 100 members, but we're at 200 members now. But 200 self-professed rich people that all think we ought to pay more taxes. That's a pretty weird group of people, huh?
Yeah, it varied.
Now, but it's true, right?
Absolutely. And it's like, I was like, if someone told me this, I don't know, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, I thought they were lying. Like, come on, man. You think these people pay all this money? But you have this whole group, and you've come together to create this thing. And I think it's fantastic. Now, I will say, with the right-wing money, because, being in that company, I got a chance to see and meet the billionaires that backed. Because I used to work for Ben Shapiro. Are you familiar with him?
Okay. I know the name. I can't remember what he does, but
he does what all right-wing pundits do, which is essentially lie on the behalf of billionaires. And I got a chance to meet these. They're called the Wilks. The Wilks brothers support this company, and seeing their tactics and how they use that money and filter throughout in this entire ecosystem, this right-wing media apparatus, like it was stunning. Now, it's my belief that yes, they spend a lot of money on their causes, but it's because they have to. They're so unpopular with their beliefs that it takes an extra 500 million, $1 billion to get this thing across, because it's so terrible. Whereas someone like you probably could do it with less money, or the project you're working on now. I don't know what your deal is with the Patriotic Millionaires exactly, but it takes much less money to do it, because we already have the advantage of being simply right.
Let's hope. We certainly think we are.
Fair enough. So, okay. Speaking of the media type things, how do you feel Patriotic Millionaires has been received? Because there's this sort of fringier element in the left that kind of shuns rich people no matter what. It's just kind of like, you have money, therefore you're an evil person, sort of an attitude. Now, I don't agree with that, but it's just like, there's this hardcore belief that if you are a rich person, that you just aren't going to do anything to help. Do you feel like Patriotic Millionaires has been able to kind of turn that?
Alvin, I don't think, is there a small contingent out there, the 330 million people in America, who think wealth just in and of itself is a hateful, horrible situation? Boy, that'd be a hard place to get to. How do you castigate someone who made a lot of money? Do you just automatically assume that they made it on the backs of others, that they got their money? And if that's the way you are, I can't fix that. But I think that for the most part, most Americans, even if they're not rich, respect people who have been able to make money on their own. But then they have a second judgment process that follows on, and that is, what do you do with that? Now, some people in this country are taken by and impressed by ostentatious, opulent lifestyle. I mean, look how 74 million people, the vast majority of them are working class people. A huge amount of them are white guys with a high school education from the South, and they love Donald Trump. They love his gold-plated everything. They love his opulence and his showiness. They eat that shit up.
Yeah.
And so they're not offended by his wealth. I think a couple things. One, they think, well, maybe if I had to do all over again, I could do what Donald Trump did. Well, they would have had to inherit $475 million from the father. First of all, they're going to get the opportunity to do that.
Small down payment.
But secondly, they're also going to have to be assholes, because that's how a large part of how he climbed up on the back of others. And I don't think most people want to do that or willing to do that. So the vast majority of people that we run into in our Patriotic Millionaire circle are deeply appreciative of the fact that we have money. We do not have to take the position that we do, and we're very much contrary to our brethren. We are what is called we are something to our own class. What's the term that we use? A traitor. We're a traitor. We're a traitor to our own class. Well, that may be true if our class is just our sheer wealth. I think it's more than just that. But if that is a complete explanation of who we are, then I guess we are. We're traitors to our own class. But that's who I am. I'm happy with me. I want to grow up and be me, Alvin. I want to grow up and be rich. I want to grow up and be a caring person. I want to grow up and be more concerned about what happens after I am dead and gone than I do while I'm here. I owe it to the earth. I owe it to mankind. I owe it to everything that's here that depends on what we human beings do as we pass through life to leave it a better place. And I'm trying desperately to do that politically, socially, ecologically. I'm trying desperately to do that. Now, listen, I do some bad shit. I drink a lot of scotch. I burn a lot of fossil fuels. I've got a jet that I fly around the country in. So I don't do everything the way that the far left thinks that I should. But I'm okay with having my own rules because I think that my rules are fairly good rules. They're not perfect, but they're rules that I arrived at with a lot of forethought, a lot of consideration, and I just want to do good. I want to do good things for everybody that I come in contact with.
Yeah, and I think I should hope that even the fringier type of left wingers, don't expect you to, drive a car with your feet like a Flintstone, But it's like, if you're going to be your plane, take a plane. These planes are fine. I think they get a lot out of pocket when they start talking like that. And I believe that since you got more of a humanitarian, streak with you, the best you can do is just do right by others. And I think, you and many others are doing that, and that's all we can ask for. So let's see. I told Sam this would be 45 minutes. We're about to hit an hour, and I want to make sure that if you have other plans, I don't hold you. So
I've got another call at 4:30, and I've got something I need to take care of. So if we can wrap it up shortly, it'd be great, so I can get this other chore done that I've got to get done before my 4:30 call.
Okay.
We've got a tax the rich program at 4:30 that we're doing. Those are great. You should go on YouTube. I think they're on YouTube. Have you seen them?
No, is this
have you seen them?
Millionaire?
Yeah, it's a regular presentation that we did. We probably did 20 or 25 of them with Congress people and senators during the last election cycle. And we have a 30-minute program that we go through, and then we do a Q&A for the last 30 minutes. And I think you could go on. I bet you could go on YouTube and search Patriotic Millionaires, Tax the Rich. And it's a specific program that we do. It's very informative. It's really, we did a lot of research on putting together the facts and the figures, and then painting the pictures that explain why tax law in America is completely out of whack, and we got to fix it. So Tax the Rich, Patriotic Millionaires. I think you'd get a kick out of it.
Okay, so I'll just ask you this one last question, and then we'll let you go. So, as I said before, I believe that money in politics is the core of all rot inside of our political dysfunction, and I see you agree. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Patriotic Millionaires, you guys kind of have an inside strategy, I guess you'd say, as far as dealing with it. And me and my company, we kind of believe more of an outside type of strategy. But just from your own opinion and perspective, do you feel like something like taxing the rich and passing legislation that does raise taxes on wealth, do you think that's something that is possible through our Congress?
Well, Alvin, there's no other way. There's no. I have to believe that. I believe that we absolutely have got to change the tax structure in America. We cannot continue the way we're going right now. We've just spent almost $6 trillion just dealing with the pandemic, with the passage of this recent COVID relief bill. That gets us at $6 trillion. Let me give you an explanation of what $1 trillion is. If I gave you $1 million, what is it? It's 11 seconds. Hold on a second. Let me give you this. This is an amazing statistic. Okay. Hold on a second. And it's telling as to what a trillion is. This friend of mine, my advisor at Morgan Stanley, gave me this the other day. Okay, 1 million seconds is 11 days. So 1 million seconds is 11 days.
Okay.
1 billion seconds is 32 years. A trillion seconds is 32,000 years.
Wow.
Now think about that. 1 million to 1 billion to 1 trillion, from 11 days to 32,000 years. And we're just about to spend 1.9 of those, and we've already spent 4. And so what we got to figure out how to, I think, pay that back. We're funding with debt. We're loading all that debt on you guys. How old are you now?
I'm 35.
How old are you now? So you're going to be living with that shit for another 40, 45 years. Yeah. How fair is that? How fair is that we not only spend the money, but we don't set up a system to recoup it? You're going to get to carry it. And see, the thing that astounds me is all my rich friends say they don't want to raise taxes. What do they think all that $6 trillion that we just spent is? It's a tax. Yeah. It's just tax on future generations. Mm-hmm. And to naively not recognize that is absurd. Let me mention one thing. Let me mention one thing you said about how we patriotic millionaires are going to be able to do this. One thing Erica is a genius at, and that is unpaid media coverage. She is amazing at getting us unpaid. If we had to buy all the coverage that we get in the press, we couldn't raise enough money. We operate on a shoestring. Many organizations out there get way more money than we do, and not nearly the coverage that we do, the market representation, because she's a genius at getting free coverage in the marketplace, but because of the internet primarily.
Yeah.
That's how we do it.
So you use the so like Facebook and like social media platforms, you use it to get a.
Well, we do things like name ourselves Patriotic Millionaires. It offends a lot of people to their core. I mean, we do things like having a 25-session symposium that says tax the rich, and we're rich people. Because when rich people say some of the stuff that we say, it blows people away. What? A rich person wants to tax themselves? People listen. They pay attention. Now somebody like Stuart Barney, who's an idiot, he always personalizes it. He always says, "You want to charge? I have 6 children, so you want me to pay more taxes?" Yes, Stuart, I do. You left the UK and you came over here and you become a millionaire over here in the United States. Yeah, I want you to pay more taxes. He probably makes $5 million a year minimum. He can pay more taxes.
Man.
Anyway,
I'm gonna have to check out that. I'll take the pain of listening to him talk to see him get destroyed.
Well, Eric Schoenberg does a good job. Look up Eric Schoenberg from Patriotic Millionaires, and when he takes Stuart on, he really beats him down. He does a great job. Alvin, I really need to run. Anything else you need to wrap up with?
No, we're good here. I want to thank you again, Stephen. This has been amazing, illuminating. I hope we get a chance to talk again at some other time. But yeah, this was perfect. Thank you so much.
By the way, I did a session in Charleston about 2 months ago with Kamal. It's a CNN program. What's Kamal's last name? A Nation of Colors. It's a weekly, I think it's Google. Let me Google Kamal real quick and get his last name. You like this guy. He's very, very good. You never heard of him?
No, I don't know much. Kamal, what was it? I'm sorry, say that again.
Kamal Bell, Bell, Kamal Bell. Look him
Maybe,
up.
yeah.
Yes, he's a stand-up comic, but he has a program called
Oh, yeah, I've seen him.
United. Yeah. So he did a video. I went and did a session with him in Charleston. It's supposed to come out next month.
Nice.
on I think it's CNN. Yeah, really good guy. Very, very good guy. Very bright guy. Asked great, telling questions. Just with a lot of his own, of his own color, his own background, his own history, his own story mixed into his questions to you. It's really, he did a good job. I was very impressed.
No, yeah, I like it. I think I saw him do a thing. I think he went to a Klan rally or something like that. And
I wouldn't be surprised. He's a crazy man. He's put himself in some crazy spots. But he's a big old guy too. He's 6'4".
Ooh,
he's a big man.
Yeah, he can handle himself.
Yeah. So, yeah. Alvin, thank you so much. I'm sorry I got to run, but I really appreciate it. And reach out if you need me for any more. You want to talk any more? I'm always glad to talk to you.
For sure. All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. You have a good day. All right.
All right, Alvin. Thanks a lot. See you now. Bye-bye.